So in this video, I'm going to sit back, relax, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on this weekend's major fight that we just saw, which was between Terence Crawford and Errol Spence. If you want to get my take about 12 hours after the main event has just ended, stick around. That's what you're getting. Terence Crawford's pretty obviously one of the 20 best fighters of all time. He's a historic all-time great. After Andre Ward retired, we have now been living in the Terence Crawford era, and I guess we just didn't know it. What we saw in this fight was a fighter who has been disrespected for most of his career, been poked at, told that he's not this, not that. 3-division world champion, annihilate a dominant 3-belt world champion who was a fan favorite, who, let's be honest, perception is reality. The majority of this promotion was built around Spence. The all-access pieces had more Spence footage than it did Crawford. It felt that a good portion of the fans were Spence fans, and Crawford made Spence look like a tune-up fight in this fight. It looked like a mismatch. It looked like a more dominant version of Devin Haney versus George Kambosos, the first fight, in which if they are to rematch, this fight probably will be on pay-per-view, but it'll probably be at a lower price point, and it'll probably have much wider odds because Crawford looked like there is a major level gap between Spence and Crawford. I think that the big thing we saw here is we saw an underdog story. We saw Crawford, who was with Top Rank, built himself up with 3-division, beat a lot of guys, and then after he beat them, these guys were never the same, and people go, well, who did those guys beat? And, you know, people point and pick and point and all types of stuff. It's looking like Crawford's just been this good for 11 to 12 years, and we didn't really know what we were looking at. Spence, on the other hand, has been a person that's been in front of our eyeballs. Him and Tank Davis benefited the most from the free boxing for all PBC era, in which boxing was on pretty much every single network. Spence gets out of the 2012 Olympics, and then he's starting to make his world title run around 2015, 2016 is when he's amping up to the IBF title. A lot of the champions, namely Keith Thurman, didn't seem all that keen at fighting Spence at that time. And then Spence stayed active after Thurman got 2 big wins over Sean Porter and Danny Garcia. Spence kind of surpassed Thurman because he actually beat Kell Brook, goes overseas, and then just starts collecting belts. And then Thurman loses his title to Manny Pacquiao. Pacquiao loses to Ugas, and then Spence gets that belt. And then Thurman, even though he had these 2 big historical wins in the middle of the last decade, Thurman's now the outside man looking in. A lot of the it's still early promotional muscle of PBC. They're about a decade in. It was built around Spence, Wilder, and Gervonta Davis. Spence is one of the marquee guys that got built into a pay-per-view star. And on this night, this felt like Jeff Lacy getting beat by Joe Calzaghe. This felt like Miguel Cotto beating Sergio Martinez. This felt like Manny Pacquiao versus Oscar De La Hoya, a fight that most people said, man, I can't wait to see this fight. And then 5 rounds into the fight that they paid for going, how did I ever think this fight was competitive? And I think this is going to be a fight where Terence Crawford now is acknowledged for the great fighter he is. And Errol Spence is going to have to answer some real questions about his commitment to the sport of boxing, because Errol, the way he fights, there's a little bit of a bully mentality. And he got bullied in this fight, and he got embarrassed and humiliated. And now when he goes back, we got to see, can Errol respond well from these questions? Or is this going to be something that when he's in fights from now on, there's going to be Errol? We heard about Errol before the car crash. Now is it going to be Spence before the Bud fight and after the Bud fight? Because I think that a lot of the guys are going to look at him and go, oh, he's beatable. And that's the scariest spot to be in boxing, is when people look at you and feel like, okay, I can take this guy on. Spence is not invincible anymore. And then furthermore, Spence's coach, Derrick James. A lot of this promotion, and if you listen to Brian Custer, he loved telling you that Derrick James was the trainer of the year, the best trainer. He got outcoached by BoMac. He got outcoached by Coach Red Spikes. He got outcoached by SAU. BoMac and his team deserve to be trainer of the year. And I think that oftentimes boxing is a world of if you say it loud enough, it becomes truth. Just because BoMac might not be what people want to put on television, he's a chubby guy from Nebraska and whatever, he runs a system that works for his team, and he shows humility in being able to differentiate power. From my outside perspective looking in, it looks like BoMac focuses kind of on the power and kind of some of the logistics. I think that from what I've seen with Red around the gym and all that stuff, it looks like he's working on strategy, and SIU is the speed guy. They differentiate tasks kind of like a football coach. It's going to be interesting to see how Derrick James responds, because Derrick James got a little personal at the press conference. It could have been to sell the fight, but he said that he didn't need other coaches. He didn't need 3 coaches to train Errol. What I heard in that was something I might have seen also in the fight, was there's a level of ego to Derrick James that he might at times not always look to other people. He might want to look at it and have the final say, which is good. You don't want too many cooks in the kitchen in boxing, because that can ruin a thing. That's actually probably a better thing than a bad thing. But what I saw in this fight was, it's probably the level of the fight, the multi-million-dollar fight. People paid such big money to see this fight. Crawford was giving Spence irreversible long-term damage in this fight, and there was no conversation about stopping the fight. I understand the warrior mentality, but this was a fight where if that fight had kept going, there needed to be starting to have conversations in the corner about Spence being stopped, because he was getting hit clean, and his strategy component is come forward, land big shots, bully the guy. Once that didn't work, it was like maybe box a little bit, and then after I do the box a little bit, let's go back. And that's what we're kind of seeing, is kind of like every great coach has a style that they kind of like using. Eddie Reynoso had that style, and then he goes on and lost. Derrick James, it seems like he likes physically strong fighters that push forward, that can jab a little bit, but they use their size and strength to be aggressive and wear on guys. That's the thing. He likes a jab, but after the jab has laid the foundation, be physical, aggressive, and wear guys out with physicality. The problem is Crawford just seemingly knew everything that they were game planning and was able to react through coaching and timing. And I think that a lot of the acclaim James has gotten now needs to go to BoMac, because BoMac has been largely disrespected for his whole career, and I think part of that also is because BoMac isn't trying to seek out the attention. I don't think James is trying to seek out the attention. I think he's a genuinely good guy, and people are giving it to him because he's such a humble and graceful person. But BoMac really deserves more praise for putting together a fight where they basically were the promotional entity. They were against the system. The PBC, if we're going to call it what it was, tried to keep Crawford out of the welterweight mix. They didn't want him because he wasn't signed in their universe of fighters. Opportunities weren't presented to him in the same manner they were presented to Errol Spence. And there was a form of, if he had lost this fight, he would have been viewed as a historically irrelevant fighter. And he channeled that aggression and beat the living crap out of Errol Spence in a fight that's probably going to define both of their careers, rightly or wrongly. Spence is more than likely now going to have trouble getting into the Hall of Fame off of this one fight, because this is such a historic loss in his career. He's going to have to do a lot of really great things to come back from it. And Crawford, to me, now is entering the all-time great of, well, who in the welterweight division couldn't he have beaten? That's when I'm getting the morning after. Will there be a rematch? I haven't heard the news. Spence kind of said something about it in December, but who knows? Who knows what it could be? If it happens, I don't think the weight class matters. Oh, they're going to move up 7 pounds. Crawford's got his number. Unless Crawford ages or gets old overnight, Crawford just knows how to beat Spence. He's got his rhythm. He's got his timing. He knows his mentality. And on top of that, I think Spence feeds off of being able to hurt opponents and weaken them. And Crawford knows he can hurt them. And I think even worse for Spence is Spence knows he can be hurt. So now there's going to be some tentative thought. Now he might delay his punches. His punches might not be as seamless, which means in a rematch, it's probably going to be even worse for Spence, which begs the question, do you even want to do a rematch? Because if Spence loses and gets stopped twice to Terence Crawford, where does he go from there? Does he even pursue the sport of boxing anymore? And does he take over the 154-pound division as everyone thought? Or does this become like a what if? Like, what would have become if he hadn't had the car crash? Because it's really feeling like this is one of these one-sided beatings where you don't want to say you can't come back from it, but it's very hard, and you have to take a lot of steps with deep analysis of who you are as a person to really battle back from such a bad loss like this. So I wish both fighters the best. I respect both coaches and fighters because they made a historic fight. And Terence Crawford, you are one of the greatest fighters ever, not just of this era, ever. You're up there with Joe Louis. You're up there with Andre Ward. You're up there with Ray Robinson. You're up there with Ray Leonard. You're one of the greatest fighters ever. And I'm sorry I didn't respect your greatness because you made it look too easy. For someone at my level, I didn't understand how good you were. So leave a comment if you like this, think I'm a cool dude, all that. Let's get it going.